China's entire banking system going bankrupt. China's economy has collapsed over the past few weeks. Recent signals have revealed that the Chinese economy may already be in recession. The country is under the grip of record inflation. Holidays, billions of dollars disappear overnight.
Fraudulent activity, and more. All these crises are terrible for the economy. But China put the final nail in the coffin. The Chinese Communist Party has tried to remain silent.
Disaster. But the truth is already out. Chinese financial structure. It's going to break. At the end of this video, I will reveal the two worst crises which will represent the final nail in the coffin. Factories are closing across China, and there is no way for the economy to bounce back. In my previous video, I covered China's housing market. Falling months after months. Home sales down 28.6%. And property investment is down 12.3% from last year.
While the double-digit slowdown is substantial, it is not that important of a reduction.
In the 2008 recession, U.S. home sales fell 50% year over year. However, there is a catch. Why China's economic data isn't so scary?
Because the data is manipulated. Recent leaks have revealed that the CCP,
China is manipulating economic data. Behind the fabricated numbers, the whole sugar. The banking system is collapsing. According to 6 anonymous Chinese bank executives, government banks are giving free loans. Government banks are giving loans, which has the same interest rate as bank deposits. Let's say Wells Fargo decides to lend $10 billion
to Walmart at an annual interest rate of 10%. That means Walmart has to pay interest at a rate of 10% per year, or $1 billion. At the same time as the loan is granted, Wells Fargo will also offer a 10% interest rate, $10 billion in reserves. Wells Fargo will then ask Walmart to collect a $10 billion loan in his Wells Fargo account.
This gives Walmart 10% interest on their deposits,
or $1 billion. So Walmart is paying $1 billion in annual interest,
while receiving $1 billion in annual interest from the same bank. This is a net interest rate of 0%, which means $10 billion was just created
out of thin air. Walmart doesn't actually need to use $10 billion in debt,
because the company can grab it for free. This artificially inflates the size of the debt by $10 billion. It is under the auspices of a manipulative government. The aim is to make it appear like a credit market is on the rise, and as long as it is technically legal to do so. Artificial loans created by CCP itself, who literally make the law. Another strategy that the CCP is using, lending itself. To show what is going on, let's say Wells Fargo and Citibank both lend each other $10 billion at 10% interest. The two banks are paying each other $1 billion, which means the net payoff is $0. Banks in China are using this strategy to promote free loan activities. My goal in this channel is to expose deceptive behavior shown by top economies and executives like the CCP. 92% of you haven't subscribed, so please press on that subscribe button. Helps me level up my content to unprecedented levels, due to which the CCP is forced to manipulate the data.
Because no one wants to take a loan, the People's Bank of China recently caught on 4 key policy interest rates to boost the economy. In addition, the PBOC also cut its 1-year lending base rate. Second time in 2022, Chinese authorities' special loans are also being planned, worth 200 billion yuan, or $29.2 billion, to property developers.
This is on top of China's current 1 trillion yuan,
or the $145 billion property fund. To show how desperate the CCP is to lend, let's analyze electronics supplier Zhong. According to Bloomberg, Zhong has received a dozen loan offers at record low interest rates despite openly saying that the company currently not borrowing. Zhejiang's CEO, Albert, knows that his company's growth prospects are dim, so there's no point to borrow money.
Albert explained, "We are not looking at borrowing, because our cash can fully cover our operations and modest growth.
The COVID outbreak and property decline, it has affected us."
Imagine being handed a dozen loan offers during a time when consumer activity is at an all-time low. CCP will do anything to support the country failed credit market.
The problem with this is that lending every mid-cap company will suffer a default.
Amount of bad debts are loans that will not be repaid. Month after month is increasing. CCP is disappointed.
There is no way to revive the economy in the short and long term. Even with CCP numbers, China's credit market has weakened considerably.
The growth of the Chinese currency supply has exceeded the limit. Credit growth for the first time since 2017. China's GDP shows similar weakness. On a quarterly basis, China's GDP shrank 2.6% in the second quarter of 2022. To save China's sinking economy, the CCP recently appealed to citizens to buy new houses. English translation of viral video. I call every comrade, Cheney says on social platforms. Making an advance to buy a property. If you are on your first property, buy another. If second, buy third. Already on the third, there's always room for a fourth.
Chinese government, the housing market is eager to boost.
That they are putting literal pressure on the citizens to buy properties. Imagine if Joe Biden came out tomorrow and asked citizens to buy more houses, even if you already had several. Chinese citizens are not stupid. They know how ridiculous CCP is and are sharing
CCP's ridiculous property announcement on social media.
Properties can fall by 40 or even 50% over the next few months, and Chinese citizens know it.
As a result of China's damaged property market, the country's banking system is on the verge of bankruptcy.
An ongoing mortgage boycott is now proposed 2.1 billion yuan, or more than $300 billion, delinquent.
I covered China's housing pre-sale Ponzi scheme in one of my previous videos. Chinese citizens were paying house mortgages, which were not built yet. This allowed property developers to use the money to sell more pre-sale houses, thus creating a pyramid. The CCP allowed the Ponzi scheme to continue for so long because they boosted China's rapid economic growth. Now, the situation is quite the opposite. The Chinese government is cracking down on the corrupt real estate industry. Over the past month, China's National Audit Office performing in scheduled reviews of the country's trust industry. National Audit Office is the same office that wiped out billions of dollars from companies like Alibaba, Tencent, Ant Group, and much more. The audit office is so powerful that he forced Alibaba donating 1/3 of your cash. Chinese initiatives. Alibaba founder Jack Ma have considerable personal experience with audit offices. He recently had to relinquish his control of Ant Group, a company he founded. In Jack Ma's resignation process, the Chinese government took a stake in the company. So why does all this have to do with the China audit?
Trust the industry? To find the answer to this question, we have to cover what a trust is. A trust fund is an account that manages assets for future generations. This includes assets such as investment accounts,
bonds, real estate, family businesses, and insurance policies. China's trust industry is astonishing. $3 trillion, which gives trust managers a lot, an incentive to defraud investors. During China's housing bubble, trust managers invested surprisingly well, converting trust assets into highly risky investments. China's recent housing crisis has been exposed. Trust industry issues. Some trust firms are defaulting on their funds. This means that trust firms are reporting that their investment products are absolutely worthless. I got a check from my grandmother for $100, and my father said I have to put it in the bank so it can grow over the years. Well, that's wonderful. A smart decision indeed, young man. We can put this check in money market mutual fund. Then we will reinvest the earnings in foreign currency accounts with compound interest. And it's gone. Should be trust funds safe investment, but recent data. The exact opposite has been shown. Trust funds have already defaulted on 58 billion yuan, or $8.6 billion in investment products. The Chinese government is understandably suspicious. Now to the trust firms. China's National Audit Office is investigating the books of at least 20 trust firms to see if they pose a significant risk. China's financial structure. Once the audit office investigates the firms, they will make recommendations to policymakers in Beijing. Beijing's policymakers will then make the rules, which hinders the trust industry by running into the same problems as seen with previous audits by the National Audit Office.
Such dangerous activity will almost certainly lead to disaster.
Economy in the short run. Some economists describe audit office operations as equivalent. Playing with fire like mortgage-backed securities in the 2008 U.S. housing recession. Everyone thought that trust funds were safe investments. Until the whole sector collapses. Recognized by the National Audit Office. That the Chinese trust industry could collapse. China's entire financial structure. With that, but trust industry is not the only field of investigation. China is also cracking down on the real estate industry, which has also been surprisingly fraudulent. Top executives and property developers.
Investigations are being conducted by the CCP. 4 officials were already suspected.
Engaging in quote-unquote, serious violations of law. Unlike the US in the 2008 recession, China is being targeted. With many swords at once. An impending crisis that could happen. An even bigger impact in housing China's international debt is a disaster.
Since President Xi was elected in 2013, he is lending trillions of dollars
to companies around China through the Belt and Road Initiative.
The Belt and Road Initiative, or BRI for short, there is a project that aims to expand China's interdependent market by lending to neighboring countries.
China's goal was to create its own market, which are interdependent.
BRI sounds great in theory, but in practice, it's a nightmare. In theory, the BRI offers easy access loans to countries around China, which helps build China's interdependent market. In practice, there are many problems with this. For the economy of the borrowing country, BRI loans are a horrible death trap. BRI loans carry high interest and are hardly generated any significant economic benefit to the borrowing country. For China to receive negative protection, resources of the borrowing country.
Commonly used as collateral. This allows China to take over easily.
Resources of the borrowing country since BRI loans are at high risk of default. And because BRI loans are easy to access, borrowers generally spend BRI loans on wasteful investment. Borrower countries are also more likely engaging in fraudulent activities. 35% of BRI infrastructure portfolio have faced problems like corruption scandals, environmental threats, and public protests. To put this in perspective, only 21% of CCP's infrastructure projects faced similar problems. Sri Lanka is a telling proof of BRI's failure. Sri Lanka took BRI loans to build a conference center, a deep seaport, an airport, a stadium, and new roads. A few years after BRI started lending, Sri Lanka is in default on its debts. And China took a 70% stake in Sri Lanka's deep-sea port. But Sri Lanka is one of many countries to fall China's debt trap. Tajikistan had to give up its land and mineral rights to settle its debts to China. The adverse effects of BRI are not only significant for the borrower, but also for China. BRI forced China to lend
that China will never see again. Russia recently defaulted on $100 million.
Interest payments, which hold Russia's debt in the default state. China has loaned Russia $932 billion through BRI. That means nearly $1 trillion in debt. What China gave to Russia just disappeared. No one knows how much BRI is lending has accumulated to, but it is definitely in the trillions. A data collector called Refinitiv made the estimate. In early 2020, BRI had a total value of $4 trillion. China is currently dealing with a currency crisis,
as the Chinese yuan is being devalued compared to other currencies.
China's currency has been devaluing recently. Further pressure on surrounding economies. The dollar to yuan exchange rate recently hit a 2-year high, which means the yuan is at a 2-year low. By devaluing the yuan, Chinese goods have become cheaper for the West. This forces countries around China
also to reduce the prices of their goods. The yuan's crisis is essentially a downward trend.
All other exporting countries, ultimately the risk of default increases for BRI loans. This is China's first overseas debt crisis. Institutional loans more than tripled in the last 2 years. Many countries already classified as junk status, including Pakistan, Argentina, Belarus, Egypt, Mongolia, Nigeria, Turkey, Ukraine, and Sri Lanka. If China was using its own cash to pay off the BRI's debt, the country would have been able to bear the pain. However, most of this loan was from China. Borrow money from others. This means that countries like the US were giving loans.
China so that China can lend money to neighboring countries. Such ridiculous behavior will fall flat soon on the face of China.
China now faces what will be the final two nails in the coffin.
The first nail was Hong Kong's COVID crisis. Because the economy of Hong Kong is dependent on international trade, the city's economies collapsed. With its strict COVID policies, in the year 2022, the population of Hong Kong decreased
the most in 6 decades. Not only this, but the average office rent in Singapore
has left Hong Kong behind for the first time since 2009.
To combat the city's failing economy, Hong Kong leader John Lee
the easing of COVID restrictions. All international travelers had to be quarantined
for 21 days on arrival in Hong Kong. This number was reduced to 7 and recently reduced to just 3 days. This has led to an amazing growth in cases of COVID. New cases of COVID in Hong Kong have increased by 250 per day. 10,000 per day in just 3 months. This would be fine in a normal economy.
But China is by no means normal. China has a zero COVID policy that gives the country
goal of zero COVID cases. Traveling from Hong Kong to China and vice versa
is very common. Only a positive person needs to travel
for millions of people from Hong Kong to China be closed. It is no coincidence that China's COVID cases in Hong Kong are increasing at the same time.
A city near Beijing called Shanghai has recently been shut down after receiving a positive COVID case. That's right. 384,000 residents were forced into lockdown
after a person has COVID. Another city, Hainan, with a population of 2.9 million.
It had to close after a small COVID outbreak. As Hong Kong's COVID accelerates, China's entire economy is about to shut down. But COVID is not the only concern.
This will destroy China's economy, as if time couldn't get any worse.
China is facing its worst drought in decades. Parts of the Yangtze River are literally drying up
because the temperature is constantly over 100 degrees. A city near Wuhan reported that the Yangtze River is at its lowest level since 1865. The Yangtze River is the longest river in China, which is often used for transporting goods. Because some parts of the river no longer exist, China is being forced to withdraw. They are delivered in trucks. A fleet usually needs at least 500 trucks for transporting the same amount of cargo. By shifting to less efficient shipping methods, companies will experience significantly lower profits. Consumers and companies will also face supply shortages.
Because there are not enough trucks to ship all the cargo,
the number of thousands will increase along with the traffic. Trucks go on the road. All these factors will harm the Chinese economy. But it actually has an even more terrifying effect. China supplies a large portion of its electricity by hydroelectric power from the Yangtze River, because the river is drying up.
Power has been cut off in neighboring towns. This is due to car assembly plants and electronic factories
to close. Foxconn, Toyota, and CATL all had to close their factories due to lack of electricity. As the drought continues to worsen, China is in a tough position economically. Both the COVID crisis and the drought will worsen China's economic crisis. There have been layoffs as China's economy continues to weaken. Alibaba has cut its workforce over the past 3 months by nearly 10,000 employees. Youth unemployment in China has reached 20%,
which is more than the country. Youth unemployment rate in 2020. It is safe to say that China can be very good right now in recession, and global implications stressing out of it. A recent study found that China is already trying strong pressure on foreign companies. With China being the world's manufacturing powerhouse, no one is prepared for what is to come. If you like this video, please hit the like button as well, and I'll see you in the next one.